Let's get right to it. Canada just passed a law that changes the game between government and citizens. It's tempting to shrug this off as just Canada, but that's a mistake. Big ideas cross borders. They always do. The real question isn't if this could happen here, but where it would hit first. The US is a patchwork of states, each with its own weak spots. What's happening up north is a blueprint, and some states are primed to follow. Tonight, I'll show you the 6 states most likely to be first. Let's break it down. First up, California, the trendsetter. The state's supermajority politics mean new ideas can become law almost overnight. California's leaders don't just accept change, they chase it, often using global trends as inspiration. The state's culture and politics feed off each other, amplifying bold moves. Think about emissions standards, tech regulations. California sets the pace and others follow. The machinery for sweeping change is already in place. Economic inequality and a hunger for big solutions make radical policies attractive. California's history of going further than federal standards is well established. The state's rivalry with Washington only fuels its urge to go its own way. Adopting a Canadian-style law could be framed as leadership, not outlier behavior. With its political dominance, cultural influence, and history of bold action, California isn't just likely to follow Canada's lead, it's racing to be first. But in its rush to pioneer, it risks going too far too fast. The desire to lead could push California over the edge. The rest of the country, they'll be watching, and maybe following. California's choices rarely stay within its borders. The question isn't if, but when. And when it happens, the ripple effects will be massive. California's next move could set the tone for the entire nation. Now Texas, the opposite of California, right? Not so fast. Texas is fiercely independent, but that's exactly why it's vulnerable. A Canadian-style law wouldn't be adopted here, it would be fought tooth and nail. But Texas is changing. Urban centers are turning blue, while rural areas dig in. If the federal government pushes a similar law, Texas becomes ground zero for resistance. The state would invoke states' rights, sparking a constitutional showdown. Urban and rural Texas would clash, city councils versus state legislature. Businesses caught in the middle would face pressure from both sides. The real risk isn't adoption, it's fragmentation. Texas could tear itself apart trying to resist, exposing deep divides. The economic boom brings in new people and ideas, fueling the tension. The battle wouldn't just be political, it'd be cultural, economic, and legal. Texas's unity would be put to the test like never before. The Lone Star State's fight could set a precedent for resistance nationwide. But in fighting to stay whole, Texas might just break itself. The paradox? The harder Texas resists, the more it risks unraveling. The eyes of the nation would be fixed on Texas's next move. Next, Florida, the free state, but built on shifting sands. Florida's leaders brand themselves as defenders against progressive overreach. But the state's population is booming and diverse, with newcomers from all over. Political identity here is more fluid than it looks. Demographic shifts could quickly change the state's direction. The economy relies on tourism and international business, industries sensitive to public perception. Major corporations already push back against state policies. A national movement could pressure Florida's business community to demand change. Ballot initiatives give citizens a direct path to rewrite the rules. Generational divides are growing. Retirees versus a surging youth population. Today's conservative dominance could be tomorrow's battleground. Florida's volatility is its weakness. The state could swing dramatically if the political tide turns. The foundation isn't solid, it's sand, ready to shift. A strong enough wave could reshape Florida overnight. The real risk, sudden unpredictable change. Florida's future is up for grabs. Now, New York, a blue state, but not a united one. Politics here is a brawl between moderates, progressives, unions, and Wall Street. A Canadian-style law would ignite fierce infighting within the dominant party. Progressives would push hard, but moderates and business interests would resist. The result? Gridlock and bitter division. Upstate and downstate are worlds apart. City-driven policies fuel resentment in rural areas. A radical law could deepen calls for separation. The media spotlight would magnify every conflict, making compromise even harder. New York's identity crisis would be on full display. Progressive utopia or capitalist powerhouse. The state could be paralyzed by its own divisions. The risk isn't smooth adoption, it's a political civil war. The cracks in New York's blue facade would be impossible to hide. The fight would expose just how fragile the coalition really is. New York's struggle would be a warning to other states. The outcome? Uncertain, but the battle lines are already drawn. New York's next move could redefine what it means to be a blue state. Illinois, the land of Lincoln, but now a land of crisis. Years of fiscal mismanagement and corruption have left the state desperate. Residents are fleeing, and the government is scrambling for solutions. In this environment, radical laws become tempting quick fixes. A Canadian-style law could be sold as a way to solve budget woes or social problems. One-party dominance means little resistance to sweeping changes. Public trust is at rock bottom. Cynicism makes radical change easier to push through. Economic divides between Chicago and the rest of the state fuel resentment. A desperate government might gamble on a drastic law to save itself. The risk isn't ideological, it's survival. Illinois could adopt radical change out of fear, not hope. The move would pit regions and communities against each other. When a state is cornered, anything can happen. Illinois' desperation could make it the most unpredictable domino. Finally, Pennsylvania, the ultimate battleground, east versus west, city versus country, blue versus red. Power shifts with every election, making the state inherently unstable. A Canadian-style law would become the defining issue, paralyzing government. Any attempt to pass it would trigger immediate backlash. Legal fights, protests, and recalls. Law enforcement and courts would be caught in the crossfire. Economic divides would fuel the conflict. Urban tech versus rural industry. The fight would become a national spectacle, with outside money and activists flooding in. Pennsylvania would be a testing ground for both parties' strategies. The risk isn't adoption or resistance, it's institutional erosion. The state could become ungovernable, with no common ground left. If Pennsylvania breaks, the national political structure could follow. The stakes here are enormous. The outcome would echo far beyond state lines. Pennsylvania's battle could decide the tour of American politics. 6 states, 6 different risks, one looming question. Canada's law is a catalyst, forcing us to confront our own divisions. The pressure is building and the cracks are already showing. The real test isn't if, but when and where the first domino falls. The choices made in these states could set the course for the entire country. So, what do you think? Which state is most at risk? Or is there another on the brink? Drop your argument in the comments below. Let's get the debate started.